Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space for this new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will review the 2017 anime OVA One Piece episode of the EastBlue. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic. With me, as always, is my co-host Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. Now, for this OVA/movie bookender that we're having today, we've chosen this particular OVA as One Piece's manga is reaching its 25th anniversary. And what better way to address this special occasion than with an OVA that gives a retelling of the beginning arcs for One Piece. And today we will be having one of our special guests from the past who has extensive knowledge on the franchise revisit this work with us. So Jay, please help me give yet another Weeaboo welcome to our co-host or guest, Jack, as he sits with us to talk about One Piece's Romance Dawn remastered, so to speak. How you doing, Jack?
I am doing fantastic. I really appreciate the opportunity to come back. I had a blast talking with you guys about Steins Gate, and I'm excited to cover what we're going to be covering this episode. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Of course. I mean, you're one of our favorite special guests, and glad to speak with you again because, you know, as an orator or a lawyer, I think your perspective on this franchise is going to be very informed and civil, I hope. Because as I've mentioned before, well, I don't know if I mentioned this when you spoke about your 9 defining anime tastes when we went over it, but yeah, I'm the least casual One Piece fan, and I'm glad I'm getting the chance to like revisit the franchise in like a retrospective way because it's not the same when you grow up with it. This is our first anime that's has been going on for more than a decade or 2 decades now. So we're in our 30s, and this is coming up on our 25th anniversary of One Piece, so it's like a property that we grew up with technically, so it's very odd to revisit it, but I want to see what our grown-up mature perspectives are now.
Absolutely, and what you said earlier, I mean, that does mean a tremendous amount to me. I really appreciate that. The thing about it is, for One Piece in particular, I mean, the fact that it has been around so long, it has affected all of us. For those of us who are fans of it and who were fans of it in the beginning of its run or around the middle of its run in the aughts going forward. There's a lot of ground to cover with it, and the reason I listed it as my number one when we went back and did our 9 was because of the profound impact it had on me over the years. And you know, I don't know that we can get into all of it, but I mean, there's so much to talk about, so much to explain, so much to go over, and I look forward to the opportunity to be able to do that.
No, so again, this is a great opportunity. I'm glad to have you both on, and it's also kind of funny because as we have been doing these last few episodes, because I am a bit more of a casual, I'm more acquainted with the One Piece franchise. It's funny because like every time I'm talking to Jay, it's like I sort of got him semi-interested in One Piece again, so I get lulled into a sense of, oh, he's one of us, he's one of us. But I guess like he still has staunch, very strong opinions that we can get into later on, and it's I'm excited to hear both sides of this argument. I feel as though I may be mid of the road, probably leaning more towards Jack, but still a little bit skeptical because I did have a love-hate relationship with One Piece in the beginning, as I'm sure we will talk about a little bit earlier when we give our general thoughts because of the reception that it had over here in the States and the debacle that was. However, before we start getting into that, I sort of wanted to have the audience get reacquainted with you, or at least see what you have been up to since the last episode, or the last special that we did with you, Jack. Have you had a chance to rewatch any of your anime? Have you been able to do anything geek related or anime related since our last podcast episode with you?
Well, sure. At the time that we did our last episode, I believe I was in the throes of doing a reread of the One Piece manga, and I've long since caught up. In the time since we recorded that show, I had an encounter with a best friend of mine last May of 2021, and we were getting, ready for to prepare for his wedding. Sam, you were there. And we got together and we hung out in May for his birthday, and it got me kind of curious about wanting to read One Piece again. This guy's name is Daniel, and he was the one who had actually introduced me to the franchise back in 2005, when there were a mere 7 manga volumes in print in America and in the West in general through Shonen Jump. And I decided to take a nostalgia tour and go back through the manga again, and it was incredibly rewarding. I picked up on some stuff I didn't pick up on before. Now that I'm 30, and it was great to kind of take a not so much a farewell tour, I guess, but to take a tour through the years that it took to follow that saga and to catch up with it in the manga. And obviously, I did make sure to take the time to watch the episode of EastBlue movie / tribute to the manga, which I had not seen before preparing for this podcast. So it was a very exciting thing to be able to watch.
Really?
Yeah.
So it was a first take for you.
It was.
Oh
it was.
My goodness.
Now I don't think I made it a secret that I'm kind of a unique breed of One Piece fan, in the sense that EastBlue is actually my favorite saga. The beginning of One Piece is actually my favorite part of the story, which I don't think I've ever heard a single One Piece fan agree with me on that point. But being as familiar as I am with the manga and the anime, both the 4Kids and the Funimation dub, as well as the Japanese, EastBlue is the content that a fan in the aughts like myself was most likely to be able to cover and explore and be familiar with. So EastBlue is something I'm very passionate about. To be able to watch this film again or not again, but for the first time, reviewing the content of the EastBlue saga again in a different form, a form made a little bit more contemporary. I know it was made in 2017, so that was about 5 years ago, but still a lot closer in time to when these events were drawn in the manga 25 years ago and premiered in the anime over 20 years ago. So it was a really wonderful experience to be able to do that.
Oh, that's really awesome. I didn't realize I was going to get your first impression on this OVA. That's really good. What about you, Jay? Was this your first time watching this OVA as well? I know you said that you watched One Piece interspersely, but I didn't take the time to ask you if this was your first exposure to this OVA as well.
At the moment, I am just speechless that Jack just casually dropped, "Oh, I just reread One Piece." Like, it was like, "Oh yeah, I do it once every year." Like, that is amazing, Jackson. Because
that's not true, actually. I
just a low key humble brag, just on the tip of his hat. It's like, "Oh, I just do it for fun."
that reread, I mean, it was the first time in at least a decade that I had done that. So it had been a long time. No, this is not something that I do all the time. One Piece is not a series you read on a yearly basis. Even as much of a fan as I am, you cannot do that.
Of course, it's just because I was sitting here imagining you in the courtroom just with like 2 volumes and just you pull out of your briefcase just to sit while you wait for the judge to arrive or something. Because again, One Piece is this epic. I mean, there's 1,040 plus chapters right now. That's 100 plus volumes, and I'm just like thinking about what is the reading speed of that man to just sit down and just read the volumes. But that's amazing. Yeah. This is my first experience with the episode of EastBlue, as well as even knowing that Toei Animation, who's responsible for it, does specials for One Piece, because it seems counterproductive, but I think we want to talk about that a little bit more later on. But I was so enraptured that they've actually taken the effort to compress the story and give you basically a abridged version of One Piece, because that's what I think a lot of fans have been demanding for years. But there's only 13 of these. They're technically TV specials because they actually do premiere on the broadcasting schedule for One Piece. So like there's a small difference between OVAs and TV specials. But yeah, like some of the other episodes are like of Skypiea, Nami has a special one, Luffy has a special one. So there's like character specific ones as well, but then there's like original creation stories by the anime's writers as well. So it's such a mixed bag of retelling and new stories that I wasn't expecting. And I'm glad this is the one that you picked, Sam, because EastBlue is like, again, maybe not everyone's favorite arc, but it is what sells people to invest in One Piece. I think it's really powerful when you update the animation to, 2010 standards, because I went back to watch episode 1 versus how they cover it in the TV special, and wow, it is amazing the advancements that one studio has made in like 20 years. About it almost makes the original unwatchable, because you see that 90s animation techniques in play there, while when you revisit this TV special, it's so updated. Like you can't even tell One Piece has aged, because obviously it hasn't because of the animation change. But it's like, oh, if anyone has been turned off to One Piece because of its 90s animation style, then watching this is definitely going to get you hooked.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It was kind of funny because I was rewatching it, and I thought that this was back in 2012, and I'm like, even though like I'm watching it, I'm like, this looks clean, but this looks a little bit cleaner than say Attack on Titan or something else like that. But as you said, like you do see there is a big difference in animation style. It is more updated, and this is also something that we can talk about when we go into our general thoughts on whether or not to show this to people that we want to introduce to One Piece, things of that nature. And I would say, for as what Jack had mentioned earlier, for a seasoned fan, seeing the first arcs being updated does the heart good in a sense, because you get a sense of pride of their work and for the story, to really see that retelling, not necessarily reimagining, but that sort of update in storytelling. And before we start going on to our general thoughts about the story, things of that nature, Jack, there is a little game that we would like to play with you that is called Resume Review. So essentially, what we normally do is, we, being Jay and myself, we would give off a resume for a voice actor, and we would have the guest choose which resume is for that voice actor, for their favorite voice actor. Oh, I'm sorry, not voice actor, but for their favorite character. But because I know of your extensive knowledge for voice acting and things like that, I'm having to go with the director route, mainly like the director for this particular OVA. And but before we go into that, I kind of want you to flex your voice actor knowledge real quick, because I'm sure that you can definitely like sound off the English cast for all the main Straw Hat crew that we see in this OVA.
Alrighty, yeah, my knowledge of the voice cast is pretty much going to be limited to the English Funimation dub. Obviously, I was familiar with One Piece during the 4Kids years, but I cannot recall the names of the people who were responsible for that particular dub. So my extensive knowledge, as you say, is really going to be limited to the English cast.
Well, I mean, that's fine. You can go ahead. Like I said, just like just flex on the audience just a little bit, showing them that your stuff about the English cast, and then we can go a little bit into the game in regards to the directors.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you, you want me to just kind of give a little background on the
Yeah,
Funimation
so
cast?
like say
Okay.
like Luffy, Sanji, Zoro, and Usopp.
So Luffy is voiced in the English Funimation dub by Colleen Klinkenbeard, who has also done extensive work in writing and I believe directing. She was a director for Steins Gate at some point for at least some of the episodes. I'm pretty sure she was. Roronoa Zoro is voiced by, oh my goodness, Christopher R. Sabat. I cannot believe I almost forgot his name.
I
Christopher
didn't know
R.
he had a middle name.
Yeah, at the time it was announced that he was cast. That's what the internet referred to him as, and everybody else since then is like Chris Sabat. It's Chris Sabat. It's Chris. Yeah. But Christopher R. Sabat is basically synonymous with the company Funimation. In recent years, he has really become just absolutely to the fore of that company, and in a sense has become not just the voice but the face of that company. His most famous role to anime fans is that of the original Funimation dub of Dragon Ball Z, where he voiced both Piccolo and Vegeta, if I'm not mistaken. Nami is voiced by Lucy Christian. I'm a little bit unfamiliar with some of the other projects that she's been involved with. Usopp is voiced by Sonny Strait, who voiced Krillin in Funimation's Dragon Ball Z dub way back in the day. And Sanji is voiced by Eric Vale, who also I know has done a lot of writing and directing on other Funimation projects also. The Funimation cast had kind of an interesting route with this particular show. In 2006, One Piece was being dubbed by 4Kids Entertainment and had been for a few years up to that point. And 4Kids lost the license for it, and it was picked up by Funimation, largely by popular demand. One Piece fans had been demanding a dub that was more faithful to the Japanese source material, more faithful to the spirit of the story. They wanted an uncensored, uncut version of the dub, which, if you know anything about the 4Kids version of One Piece, was highly censored, highly edited, to the point where entire story arcs would be omitted. And so the Funimation voice cast came along in 2007, and it was announced that they were going to be picking up dubbing One Piece for broadcast, beginning with the Skypiea saga at episode 144. And they spent the next few years not only dubbing Skypiea, but also dubbing the first 143 episodes, starting with, of course, the EastBlue saga, which was released on DVD in 2008, uncut. Some of my my most cherished memories in my high school nerddom were waiting to see those DVD releases, pick them up and watch them, and just marvel at how much better the quality of the dubbing was compared to what I had seen before as a One Piece fan. So Funimation has maintained the license, and of course the same Funimation cast that started dubbing One Piece, oh my goodness, 15 years ago now, came back to do the English version of this particular OVA that we're discussing, which is nice and pleasant to see.
Awesome. I didn't realize that they were doing updated episodes in tandem with going back and redoing the beginning episodes as well. That's really something, a testament to the cast and their work, along with the translators as well. So I have a lot more respect for the Funimation crew in regards to their voice work. So thank you for that insight of knowledge, Jack. And now we would like to get to the game a little bit. So just to recap, I'm going to spout off the works from my resume, and Jay is going to spout off works from his resume. And essentially, you have to choose between the two on which resume is the resume for the director of this episode of the EastBlue. Okay?
Oh boy, alrighty.
All right. So, with my resume, I was an episode director in One Piece. I had also done some episode directing in Black Butler 2. I did some storyboard work in Bleach. I also did some directing, script writing, and I was the unit director in Hikaru no Go. I also did some storyboard work in One Piece Strong World. I was also the assistant director in My Neighbor Totoro. And that is from Resume A.
And Resume B, so I'm behind the curtain talking about myself. I am a director of a few episodes of Haikyuu, the volleyball anime. Is the director for the One Piece film Stampede, as well as Gold, where I was a unit director. And finally, in the Pokemon movie The Power of Us, worked on the storyboard.
So, Jack, now it is your turn to choose which of us is the director of the EastBlue episode. Oh, real quick. Before you decide, know that your penalty for getting this wrong, it would have to be every time we mention Nami, you have to say Nami Schwan.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Naturally, you guys did not tell me that before I agreed to this challenge. All right, okay. Now, just for clarification, this is the Japanese director or the English dub director?
These are the Japanese directors. I might have overestimated your abilities a little bit, but as I said from your flex earlier, I wanted to try to come prepared.
Okay. Well, based on the resumes, I really hope I get this right. I'm gonna go with A.
So A was my resume, and you, sir, are wrong.
Oh no.
My resume was for Tetsuya Endo, which was the director for the episode of Skypiea. And Jay's resume was for Takashi Otsuka, who was the EastBlue director.
Okay. Alrighty.
So now, every time that we hear our favorite redhead's name, you have to say, "Oh, Nami Schwan."
It's better than having to take a shot. I'll take it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for playing that game with us, Jack. I really did appreciate that, and also appreciate your insights in regards to the voice acting work and what Funimation has done with One Piece up until this point. Jay, do you have any questions or comments before we move on?
Not really, because again, I think what Toei Animation has done, or specifically what the two resumes show, is that they do keep a lot of their directors in house, meaning that they just make sure that directors that have shown a comprehension for the storytelling in One Piece stays consistent throughout these specials. So, like the director of EastBlue, again, part of my resume, he did Stampede as the director, as well as the Gold. That's such a weird title. Yeah, I guess they're all one or one name, like Z, Gold, well, Strong World. But anyways, yeah, it's good to hear that they do that or keep that as a conscious effort.
Oh yeah, I would say definitely makes the spirits of the franchise consistent. And as they continue to recycle the cast and directors, things of that nature. So, especially when you have such heartfelt stories, very that's told in One Piece to such a degree, to have that same air, spirit, sense of self throughout the franchise, having it consistent, works very well with the storytelling aspect, even though it changes very, very drastically from the beginning to the end, as we would talk about later on in the show. Oh, I totally forgot about time codes and descriptions when we were doing our resume review, but we can say some of it now as we're about to do a general overview of the franchise, or at least of this. I think you mentioned it was a TV special, Jay. It's not considered an OVA.
Yes, OVA just stands for online video animation. So because the One Piece specials are given broadcast rights on like the scheduling for One Piece, they're considered TV specials. And it does matter again to the budget and about why. I think we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but why there aren't more TV specials for One Piece.
Okay, no, that would be very interesting. If you would definitely bring that back, because I would definitely like to know more about why we don't have more TV specials. Excuse me. But to give a brief summary, Jay, do you want me to give a summary, or have the expert Jack give a summary of the special? Because I know, like in the past, you haven't really liked my summaries all too well.
Oh, I can give a quick summary since you did it for a couple previous episodes, because I do think like the act of summarizing is really difficult because again, how much do you actually disclose up front about a special or episode? Because for this, it is basically a hour and 46-minute special covering the EastBlue arc, which normally took around 54 episodes, Jack, and it's basically covers 100 chapters or 12 volumes. I believe that's the breakdown. Is that close?
That is right. 53 episodes, but everything else is perfect, man. You're really close.
So close. Okay, so close. Yeah, so it's almost 2 hours compressed in this abridged version of that arc, and it's covering basically the background or the introduction to the Straw Hats as the members of Zoro, Usopp, Sanji, and Nami. And One Piece is kind of a classic series, so it's just a band of pirates gathering in search of One Piece, which is a famed treasure left by the King of Pirates, Goldie Roger. And that's essentially it. And there's so much to delve into, but again, this is an abridged version, so like a lot of things are left out, but I think a lot of the moments are captured in earnest. So that's how I would summarize it.
Okay, no, that's a good, concise summary. Like you said, gives you enough without giving stuff away. And as just a little bit more, like the genre is action, adventure, comedy, drama, and it is rated PG-13. It's found on Funimation as well as Crunchyroll. Now, on to a bit of the general overview of the special, I guess, of the franchise in general as well. This would be a question for both of you, I guess mainly more towards Jack, just because of the nature of the question. But why should anybody watch One Piece? And if you had to compare it to a more contemporary or a more mainstream show that you want to introduce people to, what would you compare it to? Because when watching, like this special is this special is not this special, but other TV specials of One Piece are available on Netflix. And this goes to my point, because after watching this special, I ended up wanting to watch the Alabasta movie as well as the Skypiea episode, and they were available on Netflix. And while on Netflix, after watching Alabasta, Netflix said that I should watch Blacklist. So that's why I bring that up. It's like, was Netflix right in comparing One Piece to Blacklist? Were they completely wrong? What's up with that?
Like the James Spader Blacklist
yes,
show?
James Spader Blacklist.
That's a shocker. I would not have guessed that would happen.
I didn't know if like that was Netflix's way of trying to give people an out from going down the anime One Piece rabbit hole, or if they were just being earnest or being like nice to the casual viewers or anything else like that. So, just to reiterate, why should people watch One Piece, and is it anything like Blacklist?
Okay, well, that's a big one. Why should anybody watch One Piece? I'm gonna caveat this and say watch/read. I think that anybody who is interested in long form serialized adventure storytelling that runs the gamut of human emotion and experience, but also maintains a somewhat silly, optimistic, cartoonish tone and accessibility. I think that if that sounds like a story somebody would like to get into, I think One Piece is a fantastic example of that. Obviously, it is incredibly long running, and that fact alone is enough to successfully disincentivize somebody from making the time to dive into it. But I think this particular TV special serves an interesting purpose in that if you have somebody who is curious about One Piece and unwilling to devote the time to watch 53 episodes worth of content or read 100 chapters of a manga before they ultimately decide to commit to it, I think that this particular special, this TV special, is a good litmus test for whether or not a person would respond positively to One Piece in this respect. More to the first way that you phrased the question as to what an appropriate comparison would be for One Piece, that is really, really, really difficult. But I think, and this isn't a recent show by any means, but it's the closest that I can come to it, honestly, is Dragon Ball Z. It is no secret among One Piece fans that Iakura Oda, the author and the creator of One Piece, was heavily inspired by Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball Z, respectively. The two of them got together for mutual interviews that are chronicled in the One Piece art books, the Color Walk books. And it's very apparent that the optimistic, empowered tone that you get in Dragon Ball Z, the humor, the objectives, the test of the human spirit, the camaraderie, the loss, the victory. One Piece has its version of all of those types of motifs and story elements. So if I had to pick a show to compare One Piece to, I honestly would say Dragon Ball Z, even though the genres probably could not be more different if they tried. They still overlap significantly in a lot of ways, and so that would be my answer.
No, that is very interesting, and excuse me, the way that you described earlier how people watching like long form television shows that run through the range of human emotions. It's very funny that you mentioned that, because the first few seasons or the first few TV shows that popped into my head were, say, stuff like Merlin or Supernatural, where they're long running shows and each episode is double the length of One Piece, and yet people would sit through and binge watch those shows just as much. And it makes me think like those same people would sort of like One Piece as well. I guess it just depends on whether or not they would accept a drawn medium as opposed to having actual people carry out the scenes and things of that nature. But Jay, throw the question on you. What show would you compare One Piece to if somebody wanted to watch One Piece and they wanted to have a good comparison or a good show to have their expectation based off of?
To talk about this question, or before getting into, a long tirade about it, I think a fair comparison is actually Law and Order. So, let me. Okay, so So I think
Oh
Jack.
man.
Yeah, I know. I think Jack said it very correctly in the way of why One Piece works in the way that it does is because it is long form storytelling, and I think today's modern audience or contemporary audience isn't actually keyed into storytelling that One Piece is offering because Law and Order in the same vein has like all the emotions, the motifs about the justice system and what's right from wrong and how do people influence a legal system and that the legal system is a product of the people. And One Piece has been going on just as long as Law and Order, I think. I think there's
Dun dun.
37 seasons of Law and Order, and then it spun off into like SVU and I forgot the other. Yeah, so I do see the Netflix algorithm why they would have connected you to Blacklist because Blacklist is like 8 or 9 season long and it's still going and it's still based around that sense of mystery and adventure and crime solving, which is why a lot of series like Detective Conan is longer than One Piece because it sells you on a main premise of this kid is the smartest person on the planet and he's solving crime. Same thing as why Castle is long running or any police drama is long running because it has a central premise that it can be repeated through a procedural. And that's what One Piece is essentially. Even though they're going through different islands and worlds and regions and biomes, it's still the Straw Hats being themselves in every situation and just adapting to the new consequences of their actions or to others or to the world. And Oda has a mastercraft in telling long form storytelling because of that reason. It's because they are interesting characters. They're well rounded, they're dynamic, they're deep, they're soulful, they're like heartbreaking, and everything you get revealed through like the different arcs to the One Piece just adds depth to their characters that you want to be along for the ride. They're just enjoyable to watch. So I would say Law and Order does the same thing with their cops and detectives and all their side stories with like recurring celebrities as well as directors that add their own personal flair into episodes. So I would say, funny enough, that One Piece and Law and Order kind of have the same similar feel to them.
That's very interesting. I did not expect. Now that you mention it, they really do feel very similar. And I made a comparison to One Piece to The Wire when I was watching this, and a question that I have later on that we will get to, and I would have to say, for somebody who disapproves of One Piece, you spoke very eloquently just now, Jay. So it's I just want to poke fun at you just a little bit for that. But no, I really do appreciate your thoughts on that, and it was very well said. Just going back to the point that Jack had mentioned earlier, that this this TV special was a very good jumping point or a good litmus test for new viewers. And I wanted to go back to the point that you had mentioned earlier, Jay, that there's not a lot of TV specials. And I sort of wanted to ask this to the both of you, like, would a show or a franchise as long as One Piece, how beneficial would it be to have these TV specials for these gargantuan arcs? Because as Jay had mentioned before, and as I have mentioned as well, there's other arcs or that had received TV specials, Skypiea, for instance, and they even released a movie in regards to Alabasta. They also released a movie in regards to Drum Island, even though they played around with the timeline a little bit, it still encompassed the entire story of Drum Island. My question would be, again, just to reiterate, is would such a long running franchise benefit from having a series of TV specials that encompass these long arcs, sort of like animated versions of compendiums? for the more casual viewer. We could start with Jay, and if you would go into a little bit of why there aren't as many TV specials as well.
Well, I thought the follow-up question to what you directed towards Jack was going to be directed to me about why would I not recommend One Piece, and that's what I have all of my notes about. So maybe we can come back, or maybe I can wrap this into the answer. But actually, on Jack's point, this being a litmus test, I think that is actually not essentially false, but I think this is a bad litmus test for getting people into One Piece because of when you hear how long. Again, the problem with One Piece isn't that it's too long. I mean, Jack just casually dropped that he reread One Piece over the past 6 months. And it's not that One Piece is too long, it's the fact that One Piece feels too long. And I think it is a distinction of attention or attention span, but also pacing, more importantly, because One Piece is incredibly methodical in how it tells its story. It's Oda has written in a way that is similar to like the Odyssey or the Iliad, in a way that you have to be patient with it. And I think people's patience with a property isn't as high as it used to be. So getting people into One Piece in the 2020s is such a extreme task. And this TV special doesn't help at all because it's giving viewers options when Toei has made so much money. They have indebted people to watching One Piece, keeping up with it, buying all of its merchandise and extraordinary or not judiciary, but not even extracurricular. What am I trying to say? It's other medias because like, does the casual One Piece fan know that there's like 3 plays of One Piece, or the musical, or the 57 6 games that there are, or the like 120 albums that One Piece has? I don't think so, because there's just so much One Piece content. When you give viewers or even new viewers the option to watch a compressed version of it, it takes away the profitability of the property. So like, instead of people committing their time to 54 episodes and watching it and streaming it and coming back and letting their subscription lapse so they have to pay more money, or buying the DVDs and Blu-rays, and then you're like, oh, we're going to just give you it in 2 hours. That's counterproductive to the bottom line of what One Piece is, because it's a long form story that you're supposed to be invested in. You're not supposed to find a shortcut to it. So the average One Piece episode roughly is like 90,000 US. So same thing with the specials, the TV specials. They're technically episodes. It's the same money, just redone animation. A lot of editors come back on to, or a lot of scenes are resketched and reanimated. So it's the same budget, but it's the story compressed. It negates the point of watching the other episodes. So why would a studio commit to shortening their property so more people will watch less of it and not be as demanding? Because there's no demand. No One Piece fan is looking for a compressed version of the story because it robs the story of its value or merit. So that's why we only have 13 TV specials. And let's see, there's 5 of them that are alternate retellings, and then there's 5 plus 6, or there's 7 original stories by the anime writers, and then 5 alternate endings of the actual show, because the Nami, the Luffy, the Mary, the Skypiea, and the Sabo one are all
hold on a minute, Jay.
retellings.
Hold on a minute, Jay. Jack has to do something because she was mentioned.
Oh, right. Nami Schwan! There you go. That's the first one.
Okay. You know what? So, I think in post, I'm going to just take that and then put it everywhere. So every time Nami is mentioned.
Or better yet, just put a time code and then edit out all the times when I say that, and then just put them all together at the end in sequence.
Oh, interesting. All right, maybe I'll see which one's funnier to me. But yeah, I think that's the point of why the specials aren't being done on a regular schedule, and why they are so, TV specials, is because it is counterproductive to getting people invested.
Yeah, so first of all, I think that the idea that Toei would not invest money in doing TV specials to summarize certain arcs of One Piece because it would disincentivize people from following and watching and paying attention to the actual long form storytelling as shown in the anime and the manga both. I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, there's no real fiscal incentive for them to keep doing it. And I think it bears reminding too that the whole reason that this TV special exists at all was to commemorate the manga, which is kind of ironic because, of course, obviously, it's an anime, and in the Japanese version, it was dubbed by the anime cast, and the anime was dubbed in English by the English anime cast. So I think that this particular special served a purpose as a way of looking back fondly on the origin of what is going to become a long form story. Oddly enough, one of the things that I think is very interesting about this special, as opposed to the anime version of these same events, is it does have a slightly more manga focused adaptation than the events of the actual anime. Just to offer an example, one of the first things you see is Luffy as a young boy stabbing himself in the face with a knife to impress his pirate friends. That is not in the anime. That is in the manga. In several points in this special, and I've noticed that the actual anime does this as well, the introduction of certain key characters is done by text on the screen surrounded by a text box with a curly Q on the opposite corner and a straight edge on the opposite corner of that one. So that style of text box comes straight out of the manga, and it was very interesting, and it sort of rammed home for me why this was made and what this was made to sort of commemorate. I definitely respect the position that One Piece fans are not likely to support further abridging of these massive story arcs. Number one, because most of them are longer than the EastBlue saga. And number two, a lot of the nuance and a lot of the detail comes in from learning pieces of information that may not have much to do with the overall story arc itself, but may be uncovered as a result. And later on, these various pieces are forged together, and it solves a particular mystery that's been running the entire length of the show. For example, this particular special omits the entire Logtown arc, which involves the first appearance of Luffy's father, who we don't know at the time. I'm hoping that I'm not spoiling it too much. I know that we probably didn't give the spoiler warning. My apologies. But no, yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And I want to also say too that I firmly agree that One Piece does feel too long. I definitely agree with that. The first 206 episodes of the anime is what I feel the most connected to when I think about the One Piece anime. And part of the reason is because it is better paced than what follows subsequent to episode 206. And One Piece's pacing problem that it is famous for really begins to show past that mark in the story. That is about the time that Davy Back and Water 7 begins. That is where the pacing of One Piece begins to adopt a sort of a different approach. Interestingly enough, the first 206 episodes of the anime, what you were likely to get is you were likely to get the story of One Piece as presented in the manga, drawn out maybe a little bit more in proportion, but you were likely to get several independent little filler arcs placed into the anime that were sort of disconnected from the main story. So you weren't watching it be as drawn out as it could have been without the filler arcs. They were sort of just adding those placeholders in. And I'm also one of the few One Piece fans that I'm aware of who will say this: I do not mind the filler arcs for the most part. But one of the things that happens after episode 207, not just with the conversion from a 4:3 aspect ratio to a 16:9 one, is the One Piece arcs begin to change their formula, and they begin to opt for dragging out the main story rather than putting in independent stories in the form of filler arcs. There are still filler arcs in One Piece past episode 207, but a lot of them are very small. A lot of them are short, and the storyline as presented in the manga is drawn out to a greater degree. So I'm even willing to stipulate to and agree with the idea that as long as One Piece does, it can feel its length. It can definitely feel its length.
And listening to hear you speak, Jack, it makes me think of a counter point for Jay's argument as well, saying that Toei won't put in the money to sort of do a concise version of One Piece when they essentially did Dragon Ball Kai, which was a concise version of Dragon Ball Z without all the filler. And the Dragon Ball set the precedence, or if it didn't set the precedence, it was during the time in which, as you had mentioned with One Piece and what we've experienced in Naruto, is the anime would catch up with the manga, and they would have those filler arcs so that the manga can progress in story, but still be relevant to the audience, to still keep them interested until the story has been finished out. So, Jay, what do you think? I mean, as I said, like bringing up Dragon Ball Kai, because we've seen Dragon Ball Kai essentially reanimate everything, just taking out all the filler. Wouldn't Toei benefit from doing the same thing with One Piece, and especially with some of the more recent arcs that we can talk about later on, where they essentially padded a fight to last more than 20 episodes just so that the manga can get ahead enough to where they can animate it. If they had a Kai version of that, it would be condensed and it would be more digestible for the audience to watch. I mean, again, they've seen success with Dragon Ball Kai, so why can't they do the same thing with One Piece?
Yeah, because it's interesting. Like, again, it's like one of those comparisons. Like, I think Jack brought this up, but it's very much apples and oranges when it comes to One Piece and Dragon Ball Z, because you want to savor One Piece. Dragon Ball Z is just about a bunch of grown men punching each other, and even not well choreographed or technically sophisticated in any way. There's nothing of there's nothing of substance that you can't just fast forward through Dragon Ball Z specifically, because it is a story that's derived solely in seeing the protagonist Goku just overcome obstacles through force of will, his strength, and all these like bizarre, not supernatural things, but getting into like the power fantasy of Dragon Ball Z. One Piece isn't at all about escapism like Dragon Ball Z is. It's not about a power fantasy. One Piece is a story about humans dealing with a lot, and you can't just tiptoe over that. You have to give people the chance to be immersed in One Piece. There's nothing to be skipped over, really. Everything has a connection. Everything that you think doesn't matter will matter eventually. Oda is kind of a master at foreshadowing, and I think that's something Jack kind of pointed out when the manga, like the original intent between the anime wasn't as much as a fidelity of recreating the manga. So when it came back to these specials, a lot of those small manga touches are put into the anime because you feel that there is importance in revisiting One Piece, because you can see that all these breadcrumbs that you didn't know were breadcrumbs were actually big loaves of bread, and about how important they are going to be down the line. So the Kai example does work for shonens that rely upon like male fantasy or male power fantasies, but One Piece isn't that story. Like, as Oda has written it, it is supposed to age with the person reading it. Like, it is a 20-year-old plus property, but Oda wrote this back in the 90s, and he was writing it for kids then, and now he's writing it for 30-year-olds like us now. So it's something that transcends Dragon Ball Z, and the Kai example would not work for One Piece.
From my perspective, I think that if they do a Kai version of One Piece, it would be without the filler and to condense some of the arcs, like Jack had mentioned, and that fight that I had mentioned earlier that was padded out to be the longest fight scene ever animated because of padding for filler. It would still be considerably long, but it would benefit from a condensation, and whether or not that retelling would be beneficial now or when One Piece is over, that's another decide, or I believe that would be something that we would have to see once, if we're all blessed to be alive during that time. That One Piece has ended in a grand fashion. But we can try to wrap up with the general overview and thoughts a little bit before we start getting into the spoilers. But one question that I wanted to present to the both of you is, this episode, the EastBlue episode, was done as a 20th anniversary uh, for this franchise. However, we haven't really heard from them, at least at this point, of a 25th anniversary celebration. There are news about another movie coming out called Red, which would be I am assuming to be focused on red hair Shanks, but nothing again at this time has been released. So I pose a question to the both of you. Do you think that there will be something to celebrate this quarter century age, or do you think that they're going to focus on other things or other landmarks? We can start with Jack this time.
I would be surprised if there was not something done to commemorate One Piece's 25th anniversary of the manga. I don't think that will take the form of a TV special. I can see it taking the form of a feature-length film that involves some elements that tie back to the beginning of One Piece. The idea of One Piece Red having to do with red-haired Shanks, I think that's probably going to come out beforehand, but I mean, something along those lines, I think would work. Personally, I would rather hope, and I'm playing my hand here and revealing this now, because the anniversary of 25th anniversary would be of the manga, not of the anime. I would almost prefer for something manga centric to come out to commemorate that.
Oh, that's a good point. Like how Attack on Titan made that giant Titan version of their manga. You think there would be You would hope that there would be something similar along those lines, Jack?
Well, not so much necessarily a re-editing of previously established One Piece manga chapters or anything like that, but I wish that maybe we could have gotten or would get something drawn by Oda that would be, I don't know, maybe something related to the main events of One Piece without being part of the main storyline or part of the chapter cover pages, or even perhaps getting a release of some of Oda's previous work. That for one of the big tragedies is that Wanted, which was a one-shot series that put Oda on the map prior to his writing One Piece, that's never been released in the West in any official capacity that I'm aware of. In my opinion, if you want to celebrate the 25th anniversary of One Piece, I think a great way to do it may be a re-release or a reprinting of Wanted, or even perhaps a re-release or a reprint of some of the Color Walk art books. Just something to commemorate the artistry and craftsmanship of the story that Oda actually does. I know that Oda's rather a private person, and that may be a little bit difficult to arrange. But in terms of the anime doing something to commemorate the 25th anniversary of One Piece, I'm confident there will be something. But I'll be honest, I would be a little bit more impressed if there was something in written form that would work, if that makes sense.
Jay, do you agree with Jack? Do you feel as though that for them to commemorate this giant landmark, they should do something more written rather than animated this time?
Yeah, like Jack said, it's a celebration of the manga as anniversary, and it's really hard to manage that because again, it's something that you have to give a lot of attention to, and it gotta be a representative of a quarter of a century, and it's really hard to comprehend that in terms of mangas. That's just not a special cover or a re-release of something or an omnibus of One Piece, because again, like the actual franchise is just too large to really compress into one celebration. So if they do probably a special release of like what Jack said about Wanted, or any of, like, maybe giving due respect to Oda, because again, a lot of mangakas do have private lives and they're overworked and a lot of health problems come up. But Oda is the man. I mean, he's inspired so much. So even something of like maybe a lot of other mangakas come together and redraw One Piece characters.
Oh, that would be nice. That would be really cool. That would be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but actually put it into like a project, like every popular mangaka that feels attached to One Piece, like just hundreds of mangakas coming together and doing something. Because generally mangakas do exchange works. Like I've seen like Oda do Jujutsu Kaisen characters and Dragon Ball Z characters, but if everyone of the manga community just comes together and say, oh, we're going to keep this a secret from Oda and like give it to him, or have it published as a special art book or something of that akin to that, I think that would be really awesome.
That reminds me, because they do little specials like that before. I want to say there was a Shonen Jump cover where artists did things differently. I remember the artist for My Hero did a rendition of Luffy in the My Hero Academia style, and even the words, or when the work of not One Piece, but when Bleach was told to be coming back from having the Thousand War arc being animated, there was also talks about the manga coming back. A lot of the artists did renditions of their favorite Bleach characters, right? Totally just like one shots, but like if, as you said, if they did a compendium of these different mangaka making renditions of One Piece characters, or even maybe even doing different One Piece chapters or something like that, that would be very cool to see. And very, very excited to that'll be very exciting to see, like having other mangakas at least like give their tribute to Oda in that fashion, because as you said, Jay, Oda has given a lot of has a strong impression on the manga community, almost as much as Dragon Ball has in his long form of storytelling. And we'll be transitioning to the spoiler section now, so that we can talk free reign, things like that. So again, just wanted to give time for the audience to talk about time codes and things like that. And Jay, we will start off with you a little bit, because you had mentioned earlier about your strong feelings, and I don't want you to be backed up by having them borrowed up the entire episode. So we can, I'm handing you your soapbox for now, so that we can, have you air out your concerns, your thoughts, and Jack, if you feel like you want to step in or make a counterpoint or things like that, I just want Jay to sort of have his piece for a moment, because again, having such strong emotions held inside is not good. I think I'm feeling this way because I just watched Red earlier today, and I don't want Jay to turn into a giant red panda.
Yeah, so it's funny that you said the about how much praise I gave to One Piece before, Sam, because there's again, I'm the least casual fan, and why I did so much forethought before this episode is because One Piece is so much on the fence for me, and it's hard to really assess it properly because I've never had a good, okay, not good. I've never had a civil, intelligent conversation or discourse with a One Piece fan. And not to take this off into a straw man argument about how the One Piece fandom kind of ruins One Piece, but it is a thing of whenever you're talking to people that are so passionate about One Piece, they sound to me like horror fans. And in the same way that horror fans don't understand non-horror fans, because horror fans like being scared and non-horror fans like not being scared. So it's a weird comparison that I think is accurate because One Piece fans know how beautiful One Piece is, and I've talked more enough about how the depth of its character, its world building, and these so many intricate things that fit together into this great masterpiece. One Piece is a masterpiece easily. That's just like such a non-confrontational thing. But is when you add the descriptor that I'm about to add is when One Piece fans get up in arms about. And I want to say that yes, One Piece is a masterpiece, but it's also unfocused and comfort food. And I think that's what brings so many people back to rereading it or rewatching it. But again, like, it's not that One Piece is too long because everyone has so much time. Like, how much media the average person consumes is just beyond what was expected, like 20 years ago. And it's not that One Piece is too long, it's just that it feels too long. And it's to a certain degree inaccessible to people for multiple reasons. But the one thing I want to talk about now for my 5 pages of notes is that there's so much like other comparable sci-fi stories, fantasy stories that are more accessible because there's a tight control of the narrative. And One Piece doesn't really care about its narrative, or I guess doesn't really care about its plot so much anymore, because I don't know One Piece fan that cares anymore what the One Piece is. It is more about, life is about the journey, not the destination. But the story, like from the EastBlue standpoint, again, why I want to focus on this point is that everyone in the beginning of One Piece has a concrete, attainable, measurable goal. So Sanji wants to find the All Blue, Nami wants to create a map of the world. But anyways, yeah, it is the case of the characters are, and I think I've talked to Sam about this to Sam before, is that what One Piece is about a bunch of pirates that don't know where they're going nor how to get there. And that's such a hard thing to find accessible to like general non-anime people or even anime people, is because we're so used to tightly controlled narratives is that we know where the story is going. But One Piece fans don't really know. Their whole strength to the series is that you're along for the ride and you'll find out when you get there. But that's such a hard thing to sell to people. And like I said, there's like other sci-fis that I like, fantasy stories I like that are comparable in size but are more tightly controlled, like Discworld, The Wheel of Time, The Color of Money, The King Killer Chronicles, even most recently like Mistborn. And if you're looking at like anime comparisons, like Berserk and Tower of God, Baki, like Hajime no Ippo are just as long, but they're more on that procedurally generated same kick of Law and Order, but it's more tightly controlled because some of them are fighters and you know the standing that they are in the world. But really, in One Piece, you don't know because of how the world is unraveling to be always bigger than we're seeing. Because like until like we didn't until like 700 issues later, we didn't even really know who the big or the emperors were. Like we knew Shanks from the Paramount War, but we didn't know anyone else. We also don't know like how you really become. Okay, no, sorry. Now I'm going to get into things that I might be corrected on, but the things I want to focus on, or like what I wrote down about why it feels so unfocused, it because the Water 7 arc or the Indies Lobby arc is my favorite because of Nico Robin talks about the Forgotten Century, and I am so invested in what that is, and it never gets talked about ever until like most recently when we discover in the Wano arc, oh, Gold Roger also could decipher them as well, and you kind of get
the poneglyphs,
you get the poneglyphs, you get them in Skypiea, you get them in Alabasta, and even like Cyberpole and the Water 7 arc go after Robin for that reason. It's like she has key information, and her backstory is that she had the information, or she had access to that information. She got everyone she loved killed. It's like, that is so heartbreaking. And then when they meet Raylan, the Dark King, later on, Robin's like, oh, I guess I'll just find out what happened in the Lost Century as I bumble my way through this gigantic world that we don't know how large it is. And I could say that for everything that I love about One Piece, like, what is the will of D? What is the origin of Devil Fruits? In Water 7, we get the name drop of one of the 3 ancient weapons that were so devastating to the world that they had to be locked away, like Pluton and Uranus and Poseidon. And then you keep going, and it's like, who's Joy Boy, and what's the voice of all things? And every time I delve into One Piece, I get pissed off because Oda has built up this monolith on like strings that he never cares about or gives enough attention to. It's just join Luffy in the gang on their next adventure, and it feels so much like Pokemon, but you get to the point of obsession with One Piece because these lingering threads are so tantalizing, but there's no satisfaction to it. And I think that's what really turns off me from recommending One Piece and thinking it is inaccessible, is because if you're not sold on the idea of this like overbearing, complex, ambitious plot, then there's nothing else to it. So again, like, One Piece is a masterpiece, but it feels so unsatisfying because of its scope, I guess.
Yeah, Jack, how would you like to address his points? Because I would say Jay makes a valid argument in the sense that sometimes the scope feels very daunting. A little bit of it is the excitement of adventure. You know, you're out adventuring, you don't really know where you're going to go, but then you do run into plot lines such as the Forgotten Century and other things along the way. You realize that there are other things in this world that has their own agency, and I would say it's sort of like a reverse problem, whereas with Dragon Ball and with Naruto, they have an issue of I don't remember what the name of it is, but it's like when like they get to the end of the story, but the fans want more, right? So the writer has to pull something out their butts to make like a character that's uber powerful for the characters to try to overcome. Is like the gang that you followed, like the Z fighters and them, like they just defeated a god. It's like, how can you go up higher than that? It's like, oh well, there's another god that made that god. It's like, okay, I guess that makes sense. Whereas in One Piece, you have the reverse problem, where it's like the story like continues to unfold and branch out, and this world seems almost never ending. So you would have like that problem, that daunting problem that Jay is referring to.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I want to say is I'm very I'm sad to hear that you haven't had a single civil conversation with a One Piece fan. Um, I wanna touch on that a little bit and give you a little background on me for a while here, because I think that this needs to lend some context to what I'm gonna say is my explanation for why I feel the way that I do about it. Um, One Piece for a long time, for several years, was the only anime slash manga I was ever interested in. I was exposed to One Piece through a friend of mine when I was 13 years old, and there were only 7 volumes of the manga at the time. I flipped through it a little bit, but I was more curious than anything else, but I didn't really take a deep dive into it. That all changed when I watched an episode of the Four Kids dub on what was then known as Toonami. One Saturday night, I had a friend over. We were bored. We just turned on the TV, and there was an episode of One Piece, and it was the Four Kids dub version of the episode where Sanji decides against all sound judgment and reason to feed Don Krieg, knowing full well what the consequences of that might be, feeding a notorious bloodthirsty pirate commodore, with his eyes on occupying your restaurant and taking everything he sees. Sanji's behavior in that episode grabbed my attention in a way that I did not anticipate. And as it happened, Volume 7, which was recently released in America at that time in 2005, covered Sanji's backstory. I picked it up, I read it, it absolutely blew me away. And that was really kind of the jumping on point. It didn't have anything to do with the overall story, it had to do with individual characters making individual decisions and doing things in the moment. Linear storytelling that is long form survives and thrives purely because of moments. Lines of dialogue, actions taken, things that you can see in a 2-page single panel, that are just iconic images that last in the reader's mind or the viewer's mind, that don't go away. And if the objective of any individual when deciding whether or not to read a manga or a comic or watch a TV show or a film or a series of films, if their objective is to watch something with a tightly zoomed in focus on plot progression over and against story beats and dramatic moments, I would say One Piece is definitely not for you. And I've been very, very hesitant, and in fact been tight-lipped about recommending One Piece to people, mainly for the reason that you discussed, that it really does feel too long. And of course, it's daunting. If you've never watched One Piece before, congratulations, you have over 1,000 episodes in the anime and over 1,040, 1,050 or so chapters of the manga to look forward to. But another reason that I think my love for the series has continued to thrive in spite of the problems that you've listed is also that when I was very much into One Piece, there were 2 or 3 other people in my life that could appreciate One Piece anywhere close to the depth that I did, and literally nobody else. All the weebs in the high school I attended looked down on me and made fun of me for being into One Piece. Nobody liked it. Nobody appreciated it. Nobody understood it. I did. And it got me through a lot of difficult times. That stories that are about adventure and overcoming odds and forging camaraderie that lasts through difficult times, in all the ways that stories like that can help a person cope with making it through the world. I've said this before, and this is going to sound absurd to a lot of people who are not One Piece fans, but maybe it won't sound so crazy if there's a given long form story that you love or that you're a fan of that maybe engenders the same reaction. One Piece is like life. Now, I want to be careful, and I want to make sure this is not misunderstood. I did not say One Piece is life. Not like Shrek is love, Shrek is life. That is not what I'm saying about One Piece. One Piece is like life in that the characters within that story do not have a tightly wound, tightly focused, narrowed down narrative of things to accomplish. It is like life in that they grow like people grow. They change like people change. They progress incrementally over time, the way that the fans in our lives have grown and progressed over time. And I will readily admit that a number of the arcs, especially as we've gotten into the new world, have been incredibly long, and I'll be perfectly honest, I'm frustrated that there's so many new characters introduced all the time that I'm expected to remember in all these massive pirate crews that frankly I don't really resonate with as much as I did Captain Kuro, Don Krieg, Arlong, Big Mom, and Kaido. I'm sorry, I just I don't respond to those characters to the extent I respond to the villains and characters of EastBlue, probably because those were the ones that I grew up with. I'm willing to acknowledge that nostalgia is a huge piece of fuel for my love for One Piece. And one of the things that I think sustains my willingness to continue with the story is that the past in One Piece is never forgotten. It is never neglected. It is never left behind. The reasons that people believe Oda is a master storyteller, and the reasons people revere him so much for his ability to tell a story, is that nothing is unimportant and locked away forever if it affects the characters. There's always an appreciation for and a respect for what came before within the narrative of the story. It's not a franchise that enjoys ripping down its past to prop up its present. If you are into a long-form adventure serial, that is vital. But I would say, a number of the things that you brought up with Jamel and the reasons why you're on the fence with One Piece and hesitant to recommend it are reasons that I definitely agree with. I don't disagree with them. I think it really is just one of those things. Like, if you get it, if it clicks with you, it clicks with you. If it just so happens that it's people of a certain age group that tend to be One Piece fans, and One Piece doesn't really resonate with people of a subsequent generation because they're deterred from a series that's over 1,000 episodes long, I understand that that's a real possibility, and I just consider myself fortunate to be one of the people that watched it when there was so little of it over here. In 2005, 4Kids was massacring the story, and Viz Media was releasing the manga a good 35 volumes behind Japan. For One Piece to explode as it has in the past decade is gratifying in a sense, but it's also one of those things where I remember feeling like virtually nobody in my life except for Sam and a few other people had access to this thing that I had access to. And so, that's really what I associate it with. So I think, if the objective here is to recommend One Piece to future generations or to people in this present age, I'm not one of those fans that's going to say, oh, you have to do this. But I just would say, I would just invite and say, look, this is a long form story. I would recommend reading the manga, which is one of the reasons why I was able to read it in 6 months. You can't watch 1,000 episodes in 6 months. You can read 1,000 chapters. But anyway, that's what I would have to offer. I'm just going to close with that.
It's good to hear that you're not a gatekeeping hipster. It's like, oh, I was into One Piece before you, back when, like you said, like when it was very limited, things of that nature. Jay, are you did you have any retorts to Jack's perspective to your points?
I mean, there was nothing to retort because it seemed like he was complete agreement with me. But yeah, it's a thing of like you can't really help. I mean, why we get attached to properties that are so personal, and I think One Piece is one of those properties that endears people to it. And like I said, it's like you feel indebted to continuing it. It's not like something done out of obligation. It's of some One Piece fans love One Piece, and it's nothing you can discredit them for because it's something that they feel very passionately about, and that passion doesn't come from nothing. It's something that is well crafted by Oda as, a master storyteller, like Jack said, and it's something you can't just feel disheartened when a One Piece fan talks. It's just like my criticism of that was just that they never feel there's anything wrong with the property. It feels like just because you call something a masterpiece doesn't mean it's perfect or it's without flaws. And I acknowledge that One Piece is a masterpiece. It just has flaws to it that everyone can't see through because of, their own personal bias for storytelling, mechanics, or whatever. But yeah, I completely agree and see where Jack's coming from.
So I'll go ahead and I'll ask you both the question anyways. Was, watching this special, what do you think was the most badass character moments within these different specials? We'll start out with you, Jack.
Zoro losing to Hawkeye Mihawk. That's a big one. Probably.
How can somebody losing be badass?
Because of the commitment he made right after he lost, and the fact that he took one injury, then he took another injury that cost him both of his blades, and then he turned around and stretched his arms out to take one final blow from Hawkeye Mihawk, purely because scars on the back are a swordsman's shame, and essentially he chose at that moment to take what was coming to him, and then after that he holds his sword up and promises to never lose again. That's not something I think that you're gonna get in the real world a whole lot when people lose. That's inspirational. How do you take defeat and turn it into a pledge to do better? I would say another moment is probably, and again, I'm biased over here, but Sanji's defense of the Baratier and his reasons for defending it, and just the fight with Gin and the result of that fight. Too, I mentioned earlier that the moment where Sanji chooses to defeat Don Krieg. Within the One Piece storyline, it is first Gin who Sanji chooses to feed over the objections of the customers and the staff and the waiters and the cooks at the restaurant. And when Gin is fighting Sanji, I believe it's done almost the same way. Gin has the ability and the moment in which to successfully kill Sanji, and he chooses not to. And the reason he can't is because Sanji showed him kindness that no one else ever had, including his commanding officer. Those sorts of moments, those sorts of character decisions, those things that they say and things that they do, things that they commit to and risk it all for, that is, those moments I would say are the most badass. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with their ability to fight.
Okay.
It has nothing whatsoever to do with their powers, with their strengths, with the slick animation added to these new fight scenes. It has nothing whatever to do with that. It has everything to do with their characters.
Oh, that's very, very good. Like you said, reason why you follow One Piece as you do, because of the characters, how they're acting moment to moment, and how they reveal their nature and how they stand by their nature. That's very, very consistent and very well spoken. Jay, what about you? Do you feel similar in your badass moments, or do you have different opinions and different badass moments?
Don't know where it lines up with like the most impactful or most defining or favorite character moments, but definitely a badass moment for me, especially in the special, is the moment where we get flashback to like young Luffy and his reaction or relationship and interaction with the Shanks pirates. Are they the Shanks pirates or the red pirates?
The red-haired pirates.
Yeah, thank you. The red-haired pirates. And there's a moment where this wannabe pirate shows up and terrorizes the town or terrorizes the bar that they're in, and smashes plates, and it's just like the stereotypical pirate about things, like yes, I'm a criminal, yes, I'm a badass. And then Luffy goes after them, like, because he has this childish sense of like justice, or like, you disrespect me, I'm going to bring a big stick and whack you over, even though you have like 20 guys with you. And then Shanks shows up with his crew, and one of the opposing pirates pulls out a pistol, and Shanks said the most badass line of, "You don't use that to threaten people." And bro, that is just so badass. Not just the line, but that Shanks' crew immediately does what a gun is supposed to do. Like, that is just so hardcore to like everything like else around One Piece. It's like, those are real pirates. Those are criminals. They're not just ruffians or people that are just making, grand statements of trying to project authority. Because like, we now in like contemporary times really only romanticize pirates. Like, that started, I don't know, like when Lord Byron wrote about pirates. Same thing like with Peter Pan and Treasure Island, when we started to say, oh yeah, pirates are like cool, man. But that's what pirates are in that moment for me, is that they're badasses that are just too cool to show that they're cool until they need to show you. So I think that's just a badass moment.
As an aside, I was looking for this, and I don't think it's in the TV special, but in the anime version of this event, they devote some time to show this. The moment that you're describing ends with Lucky Roo shooting the bandit who's threatening Shanks with the pistol, right? And it's sort of a surprise. You don't immediately know that one of Shanks's top guys is standing right behind the guy with the gun at the time, but he is. And he does shoot the bandit falls. In the anime, there's a 2-second shot devoted to seeing Lucky Roo take an extra bite out of the chicken leg that is in his mouth that he is eating at the same time he pulls that trigger and kills the bandit. And I was hoping to see that in there, but it's like, nope, no, Lucky Roo still gets to eat his chicken privately.
It's dirty work. I mean, you can't get blood on your chicken leg, man. But it's funny that you had mentioned that, or at least have reminded me that some parts have been left out of the special. And my follow-up question would be, well, I think Jack had answered this partially because you had mentioned the scene where Sanji feeds Don Krieg repetitively, and for good reason. But my question was there anything in this special that was left out of the EastBlue that was your favorite part? And honestly, I didn't expect my this to be considered my favorite part, or I guess it's not necessarily my favorite. I suppose it's something that I was looking forward to, because the one thing in this special that was left out, that was again realizing this, it was a great surprise to me, was that we have an incredible lack of Buggy the Clown in this special, and he was just in and out of the EastBlue. He was like that annoying terror that you grew to love, or at least I did. And I would say he was a good parallel to Luffy, in the sense of, we see Luffy grow in notoriety because of his accomplishments, and Buggy grew in notoriety essentially due to, I forgot what the phrase is, but essentially just being around Luffy, right? Just because of being, he gained notoriety just being an acquaintance, not necessarily an accomplice, but he was there. And we see this in the Paramount War, and I mean, he basically has the Usopp buff of, just showing up in the right place at the right time, saying the right things, and everybody's just following along. and he ends up becoming a warlord of the sea because of it. So again, that was sort of my realization that was like, I guess Buggy was like one of my favorite parts of the EastBlue, and this special didn't have it. And so my question would be to Jay, was there a favorite part that was left out of this special, or do you think that there was something that should have been that was kept out of this special that should have been kept in?
I really have no way to answering this because I really don't remember the anime since it's been what, like 15 years. So I think, I mean, just because Jack mentioned it, is that if the presence of his name is his name Dragon D Monkey?
Monkey D Dragon.
Monkey D Dragon, yeah. Because you're in the West, I get it. But yeah, Monkey D Dragon. But yeah, it's like that is such a weird thing to, I guess, cut out, because I guess it matters in the long run when he does come into the story. But I think that's a, like, not disservice, but I think it's like one of those Easter eggs that shouldn't have been left out because of, I don't know if his power set or his why Logtown is so relevant about even what he was doing in Logtown at the time. But if it does come back to specials, or at least if Toei does make more specials even after One Piece ends, I think that's going to be a missed opportunity to put Dragon in there at that moment, especially. So anything, I think it's just like Easter eggs that were cut for that reason. Like any moments were cut probably because of their irrelevance or their foreshadowing. But I think those foreshadowing moments, like I've said, feel like more like feel like loaves than just breadcrumbs. So I think just small moments like that.
As you mentioned, like talking about the breadcrumbs, like leading up to different parts of the story, it's sort of reminded me of when Jack was mentioning how some of the newer villains aren't resonating as much as the earlier villains did. And I would say, like, there is a stark contrast with how the beginning of the franchise feels compared to what it feels right now. I would say, for instance, it's in the EastBlue and everything up into Alabasta. It feels ground level more intimate, whereas the stakes now are so much higher because of where they are at in terms of the hierarchy and power. I guess, like, this was sort of like leads to one of my questions that I had mentioned earlier, going to your point, Jay, about the Law and Order comparison. As I was watching the EastBlue special, I am reminded of The Wire, in the sense that in The Wire, we follow cops and gang members within the Baltimore, Maryland area. And within the show, you get that sense of parallel between these two factions, that they may not necessarily be too different aside from name or simply just being on the opposite side of the law. I would say in the EastBlue, we definitely get this parallel that's very, very strong in seeing how pirates and naval officers and the Marines, how they operate within the smaller islands or the smaller governments. And we have more of a connection to some of the villains, such as Captain Kuro or Don Krieg, mainly because we can see their direct impact to the little person. I mean, we see, I guess you can parallel it to Mihawk, where when he comes into the Baratier fight, he is essentially a natural phenomenon where nobody can stop him. Whereas with Kuro, with Don Krieg, they are just believable enough to be like a human obstacle that you can overcome, but because they had outwitted you or they were just strong enough, they can overpower you. So it's sort of like that sting where it's like, you can beat me in a fight, but you can't, right? So trying to bring this back to my question is like, do you see those same parallels that I had mentioned, where it's like the Marines and the pirates, and do you feel as though well, first, do you see those same parallels, and do you feel as though those parallels are stronger in the beginning of the franchise rather than where we see the franchise is right now? And Jack, we can start out with you.
I'm gonna say the former. I think that the can you go over the first part of that question again?
Yeah. So essentially, do you see a parallel between the pirates and the Marines depicted? Like, do they the way that they operate, is it the same parallel that we would see, say, in The Wire or in Law and Order, where essentially the cops are the same as the people on the other side of the law? The only thing that's different is where they technically stand in regards to the law.
I think that One Piece does a great job of nuancing this a lot. One Piece does a good job of making sure that you understand that when you're talking about the Marines, you're talking about the world government. There are individuals within those systems that stand for the system in place and will continue to do what they can to support it and uphold it. And then there are individuals that do things differently. Some examples from the Marines specifically: you have Captain Smoker, you have Admiral Aokiji, you have Kobe. These are all individuals that are motivated by a sense of justice that is not necessarily aligned with the orders that they are given from high command and from the world government. And so I think there are some moments in One Piece where it looks like the Marines and the pirates may not be all that different, except for the code that they follow. But One Piece does a good job, I think, of showing several situations where, for all intents and purposes, the Marines and the pirates can sometimes become almost allies if there's a bigger problem to be solved. In Alabasta, for example, Smoker made it so that he and Tashigi were oriented around backing up the efforts of the Straw Hats to take out the agents of Baroque Works. Aokiji was so infuriated by what happened after the Paramount War that he up and left the Marines entirely. So I mean, I think it's probably a little bit more along the lines of trying to point out ways that the Marines and the pirates are similar rather than different. There's all kinds of jokes in One Piece made by the various characters about how, oh, well, we're the pirates, we're the bad guys, we have to expect that we're going to be treated horribly and badly and stuff. And the assumption by many Marine characters in One Piece is, oh, well, we're the good guys, we fight for justice, we fight for what's right. And One Piece is very good about allowing for shades of gray and allowing for deep scrutiny over what the right thing to do actually is. Nami's mother figure, for example, Bellamere, she was a former Marine, and the spirit of what she learned in the Marines and her beliefs as a former Marine propelled her to do what she did for Nami and for Nojiko when they were children. So it's very interesting. One Piece portrays Marines and pirates as both being potential heroes and potential villains.
Jay, what are your thoughts about this? Do you see a parallel between pirates and the naval officers?
As this is getting over 2 hours, I'll keep my answer short because this is like one of the most interesting questions I would like to talk more about. But it is, just to put in simple terms, that when do we actually ever see the Straw Hats being pirates, but it is a thing of that there are the pirates in One Piece, there's the Straw Hats, and then there's the Marines, where, like, as Jack said, is like there are levels of gray, is that everyone exists in a sense of grayscale, and then there's of course the extremes where Kobe and versus Rob Lucci represents the extremes in the military, and then the extremes in the pirates may be Marshall D. Teague and Luffy, Monkey D. Luffy. Yeah, so they're both D's. But anyways, yeah. So like there are the moderates, and then there are the radicals and the extremists on both sides, and but everyone's mixed in with gray because there's really no sense of, or everyone has their own individual sense of justice or fairness or right and wrong. So there is more of that Venn diagram that overlaps than there are in the extremes. And when they are the extremes, they're terribly in the extremes. So yeah, more gray than black and white.
And do you feel as though that's been consistent throughout the entire series, or do you feel as though there was more gray in the beginning or more gray at the end?
It's definitely gotten more grayer because even in the example of why I feel Water 7 is so powerful is that the military will implement something to the extreme called the Buster Call, which is the complete annihilation of whatever its target is. And that feels so evil, more than, quote unquote evil for whatever pirates could do, because most pirates, other than like Whitebeard and the Four Empires and the warlords, can't operate in that power set. So the military is just so overpowered, and then they have not even, like, when the Buster Call does get called, there's like no checks and balances for that use of power. It's literally just a call that they make. Like there's no like upper authority that authorizes it or like channels to go through. So it feels like a very evil thing, but in One Piece's world, like those terms good and evil are just perspectives. They're not really hard set into the ethics of the world itself. So yeah, it's been set in the beginning from Arlong taking over a town and enslaving people and taking a little girl as this map maker, to like Captain Morgan tying up Zoro and attempting to chop Luffy in half, but giving his son free range to just shoot little girls potentially. So it's like both sides, and then everything else is just like escalating as the world expands and everyone just gets more powerful.
I'm glad you brought the moments back up, the backstories, because we, as you mentioned, with time running out, trying to bring the scope of the discussion back to EastBlue a little bit more. In terms of the characters' backstory that we've seen, being Luffy, Sanji, Zoro, and Nami, which of those four do you think was the most impactful within this EastBlue special?
So of the Straw Hat crew members, it's definitely...
Oh, yeah, and Usopp. I forgot about Usopp.
Yeah, so because Usopp is my most impactful character. For the moment of, like, even though I think the Zoro moment of him getting beaten by Mihawk is very well done, I think the moment when Usopp is standing by himself and going against the is it the Black Cats, cat pirates, but yeah, that moment where he's just getting rock hedge slammered in the face and he's just clinging to this pirate, because that's all that, that's really what is the core of Usopp's character, is that he's going to be the man, like maybe to quote something from Captain America, but he's going to be the one that throws himself on the wire or throws himself on a grenade, and he'll do it every single time. And he stands up to Luffy again, like Water 7 is my favorite. Like he stands up to Luffy, like one of the only Straw Hats that actually does that. And that moment where he's just getting pounded in the face, he's powerless, but that's not going to stop Usopp from saving the people that he loves and the town that he loves and the girl that he loves, or to stop him from being an adventurer. Like he's going to stand tall and even get beaten down to the inch of his life that he does throughout the series. But that is so impactful because that's the heart. Like Usopp feels like the heart of the Straw Hats, and that moment just sells it for me.
I would say like you were right that you are right in that sense that I'm glad I can't stop thinking about it because you brought in the Avengers. I would say how Hawkeye is for the MCU Avengers, Usopp is for the pirate crew, or at least Usopp and Nami, because and this was even I want to say even in mentioned in the Alabasta arc where they essentially are the weakest of the crew members and they have to do their best to keep pace with everybody else. And Usopp makes weapons and cool devices to help them essentially keep pace until the 2 year mark. And because they're so human, they keep the crew grounded, which I think is why Usopp is able to disagree with Luffy on certain things and people stop and listen because again like he essentially represents the humanity within the crew and that's something that I really appreciate. um Jack, so the question being to you, right? Since the scene with Don Krieg, with Sanji feeding Don Krieg, is not in this special, what was the most impactful scene in this EastBlue special to you?
I think it would be the moment where Nami is at her wits' end and truly knows that there is no way that she is going to successfully be able to buy back her village and free her people from Arlong's tyranny. And she responds by taking it out on Arlong the only way she can, by stabbing the tattoo on her arm repeatedly. That performance, in no matter what version you're watching, Japanese or English, is absolutely raw and gripping. And Lucy Christian does a fantastic job in the English dub of it, and she does it yet again for this TV special. And as she stabs herself repeatedly, Luffy's the one who eventually stops her, takes the knife, gives her his hat, and goes forward with the remaining crew to do what they need to do. And so I would say for me, other than that, I think that's probably the moment in the EastBlue that is frankly the climax of that saga.
And with that, we shall be going into our closing remarks of this episode. I had a really good time speaking to the both of you. It seems like we were able to have a civil conversation between One Piece fans and a non-One Piece fan. And I mean, nobody's blood was drawn today, so that's always a good day. And Jack, do you have any last comments or regards before we go on to Jay?
Sure. I mean, One Piece is a gargantuan series with a lot to it. It's one of those things where the fans of One Piece are likely to be people who have invested a tremendous amount of time and energy and effort keeping up with it, regardless of what form they read it in, the manga or the anime. And so naturally, for a show that's lasted as long as One Piece has, and garnered the kind of fan reception and fan appreciation that it has, the fan base is very passionate, understandably so. But for people who are hesitant or on the fence about it, I would encourage you to get on board. I would encourage you to watch EastBlue if you don't have time to devote your attention to 53 episodes or 100 chapters of the manga. I would say give the EastBlue TV special that we've discussed, give it a shot and take a look at it and see if it's the kind of thing that gets you curious. And if it is, I would say talk to a One Piece fan about what to do next and where to go into the story. So
reach out to your local One Piece fan expert. Use this number that we'll have here. That can help you walk through all your emotional trauma that you're about to experience.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for that, Jack, and thanks for hopping on our podcast as well. Jay, do you have any last thoughts, comments, or remarks you would like to share with us?
Yeah, so again, thank you, Jackson, for coming on, because this was a very nice civil discussion that we had, and I was like, I liked this to the point of like, oh, I could talk endlessly about One Piece, and I think I could still do that now, but we're approaching 3 hours, so I want to make sure that the conversation stays listenable, I guess. But yeah, I think of the 5 pages of notes I whittled down originally into what I shared with on the podcast, it's just that One Piece is again, I want to say this to be clear, but it's a masterpiece. It's really hard to equate this to anything else in media. I mean, there's like long form storytelling that we've talked about and gave examples of, but like One Piece is, I think Jack said this, but it's like about life. It's just a story that you have to follow with, that Oda has written for more than 20 years now, and he's kind of written it in that kind of mind. Because like when you get to the EastBlue arc, it's childhood. It feels like the pirates are the good guys. They're the romanticized versions. They're the people that will come in and save the day. And where it is now is like getting into these like deep parallels of being an adult and leaving behind a legacy, and how do you compare to the last generation and living up to what the last generation did. And it's just this amazing story that you grow up with. So when you have people introducing new people or new audiences to One Piece, it's something that's going to be missed out on. It's like, well, us 30-year-olds are not going to give a child One Piece and then tell them, oh, read this over the next 20 years of your life. But it feels in the same void as not Birdhood, but Boyhood. I think it was Linklater, director Richard Linklater, that did that movie. But it's just a story that you have to follow, because it's a lifetime journey. Not to be cheesy about it, but it's something that you feel like you can grow up with, and it's going to be like, oh, when I'm 78 years old in a retirement home, I'm going to have all the volumes of One Piece to read again, especially for Jack, who reads it once every year. But just to close, just to close on not a negative point, but something that I would have liked to see with how many like video games are. There's like 57 video games of One Piece, but I would love to see a rendition of One Piece that's like Elden Ring or the Souls games, where it's just this expansive world that you just get to openly explore at your own pace. And even though those kind of games aren't really character driven, the world of One Piece is so intricate, and you don't really have a good map of it. But when One Piece is all finished, I hope there's a very open world kind of centric game around One Piece. So I would say like I'm waiting for the next medium of One Piece that I can really enjoy. And it feels so much like Kingdom Hearts or Chrono Triggers or like the Dark Souls games, where there's just so much narrative built into the environmental setting that I'm always going to be I'm not always not going to be a One Piece fan, if that makes sense. But as soon as the Oda finishes works, I'm going to sit down and read One Piece for the first time ever and enjoy it. I think there's nothing to really gripe about. It's just like, it's not for everyone, and that's fine. So that's my final thought on One Piece.
It's very interesting you said that. Just wanted to go into a quick tangent about what you said about the video game. I just recently saw a TikTok video that brought to attention, I don't remember the name of the people, but it was the meteorological people that Nami was with, or if it was either them or it was Nico Robbins' people, that basically had a globe of their world, and the TikToker brought into focus just how many moons that world has, and that world, the world of One Piece has at least 7 moons, and one of those moons has a moon. So it's just crazy just how big the planet has to be to have that many moons, and it would sort of explain why the world's oceans and seas are as crazy and wonky as it is. And
one of those moons has a conquering army on it, led by God Inaru.
Exactly. That was a comment that he made. He was like, I wonder which of those moons he landed on. So it's just a bit funny, and I think that something akin to an Elden Ring game, like you had mentioned, Jay, or at least a large MMORPG of One Piece would happen once the story has come to its conclusion, because then the developers can have an idea of like how big the world of One Piece is, and you can sort of have a game akin to No Man's Sky, except like more concrete, more solidified, because they know of all the different types of islands that they need to put in the system, so to speak. So that I would dang, now I really want that to happen. I'm making it a headcanon now, Jay. I feel like we need to have a prediction on when that should come out. But again, good closing remarks from both of you, and we can sit here and talk 3 more hours about this wonderful franchise. But as we said, this franchise is not necessarily for the faint of heart. It seems to be a resounding, unanimous decision in that regard, and a lot of us have said that this special, it is a titration of the EastBlue saga. You don't get to see everything, but you get to see a lot of the good highlights. And again, as Jack said, if this turns out to be your jam, then reach out to your local One Piece fan. That rhymed, and I did not mean that to happen, so that was great. Before I ramble on anymore, Jay, what do you have for us today?
All right, so again, like the One Piece special for the EastBlue, this is number 12 of the existing 13, so it does seem to be on track to have more every 2 years, so I'm looking forward to whatever specials come up next. But I wanted to bring the opening for the episode about Luffy. So there's an episode of Luffy for one of the for one of the specials, and I wanted to read out the narration at the beginning because it's actually interestingly worded. So it goes: wealth, fame, power, a man who acquired everything in this world, the pirate king Gold Roger. His final words at his execution sent people to the seas. My wealth and treasures, if you want it, you can have it. Search for it. I left it all at that place. In search of the great treasure left behind by Gold Roger, One Piece, many fans went to battle under their flags. During this time, there was one young man who set out in search of One Piece. During his search for crew members, he had many adventures and became stronger. His pirate crew recognized as the face of a new era.